What's up, MetaNerdz? This video will break down one of the most unique looking, massive, and underrated ships. It captured what might be the most rare species in the galaxy, and turned the rebels into the genocidal maniacs for once. The Praetor Mark II-class battlecruiser. This thing has amazing real-world lore. If you don't know, Fractal Sponge created tons of renders, some of ships that are mentioned or vaguely shown in backgrounds of things like comics, and LucasArts reached out and licensed them and incorporated many of these designs into guidebooks of all sorts. The creator of these renders does have a different vision of many of the details of this ship, which I want to include towards the end. That might sound messed up since he made it, but the details from the Age of Rebellion RPG guide are more fleshed out, and we'll get into its history, including the first time it appeared way back in 1977, the same year Star Wars was released, debuting in comic number 60. Then we'll get to the really interesting ways that Fractal Sponge visions differed from this. It was manufactured by Kuat Drive Yards at a cost of 700 million credits. This would make Thrawn faint, as it's the equivalent to 11,667 TIE fighters, and about 4.7 times the ISD. Its length was 4,800 meters, or 3 miles, making it 3 times the ISD, or you could line up 663 TIEs. Its hyperdrive was likely a Class 2 like most Imperial ships, and its armament is staggering. 60 quad heavy turbolaser batteries, 40 twin medium turbolaser batteries, 10 twin long-range ion cannon batteries, 30 twin ion cannons, and 10 heavy tractor beam emitters. Note there are no torpedo tubes or missiles, as making your whole ship run off of just Tabana gas and the power from the fusion generator is a lot better for logistics. I have an old video on how refueling ships was always a thing in Star Wars. There was some outrage over some cannon fuel scene that I don't even remember, but things like refueling ships and stations and the importance of Bespin itself was always a part of the lore. Because although they do have fusion generators, which can have enormous energy outputs from very little material, there is still some material used. They're not perpetual motion machines. And since these capital ships use enormous power in everything from engines to guns and hyperspace travel, they can burn through even large stores of fuel for those fusion engines. For a comparison, think about how someone from the 1800s would think that future electric energy would only cost a few cents a month, since they couldn't think about just how power-hungry things are like air conditioning, your dryers, your Bitcoin mining station, and your gaming systems are. The most famous refueling ship is the Ultor class, and the largest station is Valaducia, and having this refueling network in place is also better than having tons of missile and torpedo shipments flying around the galaxy, ready to be picked off by rebels. Civilians would always need fuel stations no matter what, and of course that could be used to charge weaponry, but there's no getting around that. And the final reason for no missiles in most Imperial ships was that they wanted to capture rebels and pirates alive. So we always see a balance of ion weapons to take down shields, turbo lasers to leave it dead in the water, and tractor beams to capture it. And if you're thinking of the Victory class, that was a Clone Wars holdover. But I am hoping to break down my favorite exception to this rule, the insane torpedo sphere. It does have a complement in the form of 120 fighters, usually TIEs, and an unspecified number of shuttles, landing craft, and AT-series walkers. I think this is just for backup, in the rare use case that this might be a single ship acting as the local Imperial Fortress headquarters, not playing too much of an active role in patrolling a sector, but working with other units and acting as an unassailable hub that could get comms out and survive the most savage rebel hit and runs. These ships would emerge from this almost comically small and hidden area right in the bow. It's simple, 2 large hangars stacked on top of each other, and you see how it's recessed a bit, creating an effect of being protected by the dorsal and ventral tips towards the bow. So though it faces forward right into incoming fire, I think it's more protected than it seems. And just for rebels hoping to spawn camp, there are several guns surrounding this area. Also surprisingly well protected is the bridge. It has the roughly same T-shaped design, though if you look close it's more rounded and there are 2 levels stacked. But this whole superstructure surrounding it really removes most of the critiques of the overexposed bridge. And again, we see many turreted guns right alongside this area. Though it is odd that these dorsal ridges house the crew areas, with 109,000 crew members, including everything from janitors to gunners, officers, and pilots, while also being able to move 14,000 passengers. I admit it doesn't look important to the ship. It's not like it's an obvious place to draw fire, but when they target the bridge or the cylinder, it's a bit dark that the crew chambers would be hit. But this might actually be genius, because in every image of this thing you will see an antenna forest along some surface, so I don't think rebels would be able to easily sneak up on the Praetor. Meaning that once the klaxon blared, these sections would be empty. Everyone should be in their stations, which are deep inside the main body or up top on the bridge. And thus these ridges act like large crumple zones or a sacrificial layer that can absorb damage, and although it sounds bad that these are the crew quarters, really there shouldn't be anybody in here during combat. Now this large cylinder is called the transport ring. It was used to store enormous amounts of supplies, raw materials strip mined from worlds, special equipment, and even live specimens like the Teasel creature, which we'll get to in a sec with its history. Its height and length is 360 meters, while being 568 meters wide, so the volume of this big cargo tube is about 58 million cubic meters. To visualize this part, there is more than enough space to fit a pair of CR-90s back to back. You could stack that about 10 times and multiply that 11 times across. So roughly 220 CR-90s could be transported inside of this. Now I'm not sure why this wouldn't just be a massive rectangular shipping container. We see that style still used in the Class 4 container transport. And I do laugh at the idea of a bunch of these rolling away and resulting in an embarrassing Imperial massacre, racking up more kills than a rebel attack, when this enormous tube took out an entire support colony. But nonetheless, these were part of a modular design that these could be easily removed and swapped out, making the Praetor Mark II in a weird way not just a battlecruiser, but a glorified cargo ship, almost like a heavily armed and armored VIP transport. A single ship which wouldn't need an escort, but release its own 120 fighters. Its harder to hit bridge, enormous energy in the shields, and tons of countermeasures, all would work to keep this cargo cylinder protected. Which, funny enough, there really aren't a lot of stats on this thing, even though it's one of the most unique aspects of the ship. That and the absurd combination of thruster clusters. Technically, these three are the main engines, the two up top and the one in the core of the middle. Then we get these two medium-sized ones, which are the same as many of these, but notice that there is a third small size. So in total that's 3 large, 38 medium, and 16 small, for a total of 57 thrusters in total. And this would all give it exceptionally fine control and maneuverability, though why it would need that is a puzzle. That may point to its use in cargo transport, needing to maneuver into the perfect spot to deliver the tube, but maybe it's just to have tons of redundancy to make sure that its cargo wasn't lost, suffering enormous hull damage, losing dozens of engines, and still being able to keep trucking through it. Maybe there's a certain amount needed to make sure that it can still jump to hyperspace, and this array of so many engines made it impossible to take them all out. Now in the comic, we do get excellent shots of the interior, which really gives you a sense of scale for how enormous this thing was. It's something that should be stressed with every capital ship. They are far larger than our space station. We are a long way off from making even one of these. We're in the galaxy far, far away. Each of these capital ships are essentially massive spacefaring cities. This scene also points to another much larger open area hangar, which is a pretty cool concept. It's like a football stadium just opening the roof to a massive area and letting the ships take off vertically. And I think that's what's trying to be shown here in this panel with this large black rectangular area here, even if it is drawn a bit oddly and not to scale. The Praetor Mark II was created early in the Galactic Empire's reign as an upgraded version of the Republic's Praetor-class Star battlecruiser. However, only a few were ever built. Imperial strategies favored massive dreadnoughts over battlecruisers, which weren't as effective at instilling fear. And so the Praetor Mark II is in a weird spot, being bigger and more expensive than the Star Destroyers, but not scratching that massive project itch like the Super Star Destroyers. Because of this, most Mark IIs are stationed in key core worlds for defense, with very few sent on dangerous missions to the outer rim of the Empire, and they rarely left their posts unless a major battle was happening. But we do have the case of the famous mission involving the Helmsman, the Mark II commanded by Admiral Mills Gill. Helmsman led a secret fleet on a mission to transport a Teasel, a living creature used for hyperspace communication, with the goal of bringing it to Coruscant. This would have helped the Imperial Navy coordinate attacks against rebel forces, giving it a tech boon that no one else would be able to understand. And this creature was the only known member of its species. Deep within the far-off Valtha Divide is where they found the many-spined Teasel, also called a Screamer, where they realized that this non-sentient creature had a special ability to be able to send information instantaneously across the galaxy to any receiver, while also being able to block other communications by creating a psychic-like scream that disrupted signals, leaving only one clear channel open. And almost machine-like, it could be predictably manipulated by using an electronic prod. The only details they were able to get on a sort of biology is simply describing it as a huge blue oval with hundreds of white circles inside of its body. As Admiral Mills Gill put it, quote, "The Teasel is a freak of nature, an organic communicator, able to take electrically supplied information input and transmit it at the speed of light to any receptor in the galaxy." The helmsman carried the Teasel in a special transportation ring, but it wasn't long before the rebel Flying Bantha Squadron attacked the fleet during its journey, killing the Teasel, possibly marking the extinction of this species. The rebels had modified stolen TIE fighters to break through the helmsman's heavy armor and shields, Though the ship was damaged, it survived, and its gun batteries retaliated, though the attacking TIE managed to escape. Later, a Praetor Mark II participated in a fleet exercise alongside Super Star Destroyers and other large ships, where they were all refueled by a massive supply ship. The Thalassa was a Praetor Mark II under command of Admiral Sander Delvardus, who led the Eriadu Authority in breaking away from the Galactic Empire following the Battle of Endor. In 4 ABY, during the New Republic's campaign against Imperial warlords, a fleet of EF-76 Nebulon B escort frigates and BTL Y-wings engaged the Thalassa in the Majora system, where they were able to destroy the ship. Really interesting is that the Hoth ion cannon was powered by connecting to scavenged Praetor-class battlecruisers. Not the Mark II exactly, but that was something that I was reminded of by the creator of these 3D models when going through the fascinating comments under the art on his page. So here's where his vision of the ship differs a little. Bit from the official RPG guides. He imagined it with the firepower of 13 ISDs. It's not 13 times larger, but a sort of cube effect is happening as the surface area increases. And not about who produced it, he imagined it with different manufacturers. For one, I like to think Praetor is a CEC product, that's Corellian Engineering Corporation, or at least a collaborative of CEC KDY, Kuat Drive Yards, or Rendili KDY product. Bellator has a better acceleration, so there's already a big difference. Bellator can carry fighters and troops, at least much more than a Praetor, even if not all that impressive numbers for a hull that size. It's therefore more multi-role than a Praetor. He also says I have the count, but it depends on the scale of the ship. I built it as 6.4 kilometers, which would mean that it would outgun a Bellador by about 25% or so. The book pegged it at 4.8 kilometers, at which point it would be about half to 2/3 of the Bellator in firepower. The book mentioned there is where the art becomes canon in the Essential Guide to Warfare, a long way from the very first comic series way back in 1977. Now be sure to check out the art using the link down in the description and comments. But first, let's thank our partners over at Geeky Grotto, who are having another 10% off sale on their already great low prices. I just got a huge haul of stuff, cool giant builds like this, which has this motor that it's going to use, cute mini block ones like this, and of course, awesome little minifigs that I'm excited to add to the collection. As you can see, I already have a ton of their stuff. It's really high quality builds that are compatible with Legos, and I'm really excited to get to building these. MOC Builds usually give you access to all sorts of builds that you can't get anywhere else, and they all come with free shipping to the United States. Check out the site, it really is fun to see all these amazing designs, from space fighters to pirate ships, real world models, kawaii tabletop decor and anime, to military builds and all kinds of parts you need, like motors, loose bricks, lights, plates, and roads. Pew pew. I really love my Geeky Grotto builds, all kinds of neat stuff. I'm sure you'll like something. Check them out using the link down below for an additional 10% off. Thanks again to Geeky Grotto. Please hit that like button, it really is the best way to help me out. Comment suggestions, subscribe to see more, and check out these other videos, I'm sure you'll like them. But most important of all, remember, if you're an ultra rare species popping up in a random comic arc, you're probably going to go extinct in a few issues. And the Force will be with you, always.